I arrived at what was supposed to be a quiet dinner and walked into 38 guests, custom decor, and a banner that said, "Welcome, baby Alex." My brother smiled. My mom hugged me and said, "We used your bonus. You weren't even supposed to know yet." I just nodded. That night, I logged in, froze every linked account, reversed 6 charges, and pulled back the entire $10,000. Within 3 days, their mortgage was flagged, their cards declined, and a foreclosure warning was on the door. I, 32M, pulled into my parents' driveway that Thursday evening expecting nothing more than the usual. Mom had called 3 days earlier asking if I could come by for dinner, something quiet, just family. She'd used that specific word, quiet, and I'd agreed without hesitation because I'd been working 60-hour weeks for the past 2 months and honestly just wanted to sit somewhere familiar and not think about spreadsheets or client calls. The street was lined with cars. I noticed that immediately but didn't think much of it. Maybe the neighbors were having something. I parked at the end of the block and walked back toward the house, my jacket slung over one arm, already thinking about Mom's pot roast. Then I opened the front door. The living room was packed. There were balloons everywhere, pale blue and white, and streamers hanging from the ceiling in swooping arcs. A table along the wall was covered in gifts wrapped in glossy paper. At least 3 dozen people turned to look at me as I stepped inside, and someone started clapping. The sound felt distant, like it was happening underwater. Across the room, spanning the entire length of the fireplace mantel, was a banner. Custom printed, professional quality. It read, "Welcome, baby Alex." My brother stood near the couch, grinning like he'd just won something. His wife sat beside him, cradling her stomach even though she was only 4 months along. Mom appeared at my side almost instantly, pulling me into a hug before I could fully process what I was seeing. She told me they'd used my bonus. She said it so casually, like she was mentioning the weather. She said I wasn't even supposed to know yet, that they'd wanted it to be a surprise, that they knew I'd understand once I saw how beautiful everything turned out. She kept her arm around my shoulders, squeezing gently, waiting for me to say something. I nodded. That was all I could manage. My brain was working too slowly to catch up. The bonus she was talking about had just hit my account 2 weeks ago. $10,000. I'd worked a brutal quarter to earn it, staying late every night, skipping weekends, closing deals that kept the entire department afloat. That money was supposed to go toward a down payment on a condo. I'd already scheduled viewings for the following week. But here it was, transformed into balloons and catering trays and a professionally printed banner welcoming a baby who wouldn't be born for 5 more months. Someone handed me a plate of food. I took it and stood there holding it, watching people I barely recognized mill around my parents' house, eating off rented dishes and toasting with champagne flutes I knew my parents hadn't owned yesterday. My brother came over and clapped me on the back, told me he knew I'd be cool about it. That family looks out for family. He said Mom had mentioned I'd been saving up, but that I'd have plenty of time to save again, and besides, this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. His first kid. Our parents' first grandchild. He asked if I was happy for him. I told him I was. He believed me. I stayed for another hour because leaving immediately would have caused a scene, and I've never been good at scenes. I smiled when people congratulated my brother. I accepted hugs from relatives I hadn't seen in years. I listened to my father give a speech about family and legacy and how proud he was. Nobody asked me if I'd known about this. Nobody seemed to think that was a relevant question. When I finally left, Mom walked me to the door. She thanked me for being so understanding. She said she'd known I wouldn't mind, that I'd always been the responsible one, the one who could handle things. She kissed my cheek and told me to drive safe. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I started the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there staring at the dashboard, my hands resting on the steering wheel, trying to figure out how I'd gotten here. The thing was, this wasn't the first time. 2 years ago, my brother had needed help with his wedding. Dad had asked if I could chip in for the venue since they were running short, and I'd done it. $3,500, gone in an afternoon. I told myself it was fine, that weddings were expensive, that I'd get it back eventually. I never did. Last year, Mom's car had broken down, and somehow it became my responsibility to cover the repairs because my brother's wife had just lost her job and they were tight on cash. Another $2,000. Also never repaid. But this was different. They hadn't asked this time. They'd just taken it. I drove home and spent the next hour confirming what I already suspected. My parents had access to my savings account. I'd added them years ago, back when I was in college, and they were helping me manage expenses. I'd never removed them because it had never seemed necessary. We were family. You trust family. I pulled up my banking app and started going through transactions. 6 charges over the past week, all linked to the party. A catering company, a rental service for tables and chairs, a custom printing shop, a bakery, a florist, a party supply store. $10,000, gone in 7 days, spent on a party for a baby that didn't exist yet. I sat on my couch until 3 in the morning, staring at my phone. Then I logged into my account and froze everything they had access to. I removed their permissions, changed my passwords, added 2-factor authentication. It took 15 minutes to lock them out completely. The charges were recent enough that I could dispute them. I called the bank's fraud line and explained the situation. I didn't lie. I told them exactly what had happened, that account holders with authorized access had made purchases without my knowledge or consent. The representative was sympathetic. She flagged the transactions and started the reversal process. 6 disputes, filed simultaneously. Then I looked at the other accounts. Months ago, my brother had asked me to co-sign on a credit card because his credit wasn't good enough to get approved on his own. He'd promised he'd use it responsibly, that it was just temporary until he built his score back up. I'd signed because he was family, and that's what you did. He'd maxed it out. $8,000, all of it sitting on a card with my name attached. The minimum payments had been coming out of my checking account automatically for 4 months. I'd noticed, but hadn't said anything because I didn't want to cause tension. I called the credit card company and reported the card as fraudulent. I explained that I'd been coerced into co-signing and that the primary cardholder had been making unauthorized charges. They opened an investigation immediately. I told them I wanted the card canceled and the debt removed from my name. Then I pulled back the entire $10,000 from my savings. The bank's fraud protection reversed every charge within 48 hours. The money reappeared in my account like it had never left. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a message. I just waited. 3 days later, my phone started ringing. Mom called first. She was crying, asking me what I'd done, saying their mortgage payment had bounced and the bank was threatening to report them. She said their credit cards had been declined at the grocery store and she didn't understand what was happening. She asked if there was some kind of mistake with my account. I told her there was no mistake. I told her I'd reversed the charges because I hadn't authorized them. She went silent for a long moment, then asked if I realized what I'd done, if I understood that this was going to affect their credit, that they could lose the house. I told her I understood perfectly. Then I hung up. My brother called an hour later. He wasn't crying. He was yelling. He said I'd sabotaged him, that the credit card company had frozen his account and launched an investigation, and now he couldn't access any of his credit. He said I'd ruined his life over 10 grand, that I was petty and selfish, and he couldn't believe we were related. I asked him if he'd ever planned on paying me back for the wedding. He didn't answer. I asked if he'd planned on paying back the 2 grand for Mom's car, or if he'd just assumed I'd forget about it. Silence. I asked if he'd thought about asking before throwing a $10,000 party with money that didn't belong to him. He called me an asshole and hung up. Dad called that evening. He was calm, measured, the way he always was when he was trying to manage a situation. He told me I needed to fix this, that I was tearing the family apart over money, that we could work something out if I'd just reverse the disputes and let them pay me back over time. I asked him how long over time meant. He said they'd figure it out, that it wasn't about the timeline, it was about trust. I asked him if he'd trusted me when he let Mom drain my account without telling me. He said that wasn't fair, that I was being difficult. I told him I wasn't being difficult. I told him I was done being the backup plan every time someone needed money. Then I hung up. The foreclosure warning arrived at their house 4 days after I reversed the charges. Mom called again, hysterical this time, begging me to fix it. She said they were going to lose everything, that this was my fault, that I was destroying the family. I didn't answer. My brother showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I watched him through the peephole, standing in the hallway, knocking on the door over and over. He was shouting, telling me to open up, calling me a coward. I sat on the couch and waited until he left. That night, I got a text from my father. It was long, paragraphs of justification and blame. He said I'd always been cold, that I'd never understood what it meant to be part of a family, that my mother was devastated and my brother's marriage was falling apart because of me. He said I needed to grow up and take responsibility for what I'd done. I blocked his number. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I posted. I didn't think I'd come back here, but things have escalated in ways I didn't anticipate, and honestly, I just need to process this somewhere outside my own head. The foreclosure warning was real. My parents are 63 and 65, and they refinanced their house 4 years ago to help my brother with his first business venture, which failed within a year. They've been barely scraping by ever since, and missing that mortgage payment pushed them over the edge. The bank doesn't care about excuses. I know some of you said I went too far. Maybe you're right. But here's the thing I didn't mention in the original post. This wasn't about the money. It was about the assumption that my money was their money, that my life was just a resource they could tap whenever they needed it. My mother called me from my aunt's phone last week. I picked up before I realized it wasn't a number I recognized. She told me they'd moved in with my aunt temporarily, that the bank had started foreclosure proceedings, and they had 60 days to come up with the full amount they owed, or they'd lose the house. She told me I could stop this. She said all I had to do was reverse what I'd done, give them back the money, and everything would go back to normal. When I asked what normal meant, she said we'd be a family again. I asked her if she'd ever planned on telling me they'd taken the money. She said they were going to tell me after the party, that they'd wanted it to be a surprise, that they knew I'd be proud to contribute to something so important. I asked her why she thought it was okay to take money I'd earned without asking. She said I was her son, that everything she and Dad had done was for me and my brother, and that this was just how families worked. She said I owed them. That word sat in my chest like a stone. Owed. I told her I didn't owe anyone access to my bank account. She started crying, called me selfish, said I'd changed, that I wasn't the son she'd raised. Then she hung up. My brother's situation is worse. The credit card investigation found that he'd been using the card for personal expenses far beyond what he'd claimed, and because I'd reported it as fraud, the company decided to pursue it as a criminal matter. He's not being charged with anything yet, but he's been interviewed twice, and his credit score has tanked so badly that he can't even get approved for a gas station card. His wife called me. She was calmer than I expected. She told me she understood why I was angry, that she'd told my brother not to ask me to co-sign in the first place, that she knew this would end badly. But then she said they were expecting a baby, that they were scared, and that my brother had made mistakes but didn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed over them. I asked her if she knew how much money they'd taken from me over the years. She said she didn't. I told her, $4,500 before the party, $10,000 for the party, $8,500 in credit card debt I'd been covering, almost $24,000 total, none of it repaid, most of it not even acknowledged. She went quiet. Then she asked what I wanted from them. I told her I didn't want anything. I just wanted them to stop acting like I existed to solve their problems. She said she'd talk to my brother. I haven't heard from her since. The family has splintered. My aunt called me last week and told me I needed to apologize, that my parents were suffering and it was my responsibility to fix it. I asked her if she'd be willing to loan them $24,000. She said that wasn't the point. I asked what the point was then. She hung up. 2 of my cousins have stopped responding to my messages. My uncle sent me a long email about forgiveness and family loyalty. I didn't reply. But here's the part that's been messing with me. I don't feel guilty. I thought I would. I thought I'd reverse everything after a few days, and we'd all sit down and have some painful conversation that ended with boundaries being set and apologies exchanged. But I don't want to reverse it. I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to be part of a family that sees me as an ATM with a heartbeat. I've started looking at condos again. I'm going to put an offer in next week. For the first time in years, I'm planning something for myself, and it feels good. Update 2. It's been 5 weeks. I wasn't going to post again, but something happened yesterday that made me realize this isn't over yet. My parents lost the house. The foreclosure went through faster than anyone expected, and they're now permanently living with my aunt. My mother isn't speaking to me. My father sent me one final email 2 weeks ago telling me I was dead to him. I didn't respond. My brother's wife left him. I found out through a mutual acquaintance who reached out to ask if I knew what was going on. Apparently, the financial stress combined with everything else was too much, and she moved back in with her parents. She's keeping the baby, but she's filing for divorce. I want to be clear, I didn't want that to happen. I know some of you will say I caused it, and maybe indirectly I did, but I didn't take out credit cards in his name. I didn't throw a $10,000 party with someone else's money. I didn't spend years treating my younger brother like a safety net. But I do think about it. Late at night, when I'm lying in bed in my new condo, I think about whether I could have done this differently, whether I should have just eaten the loss, written it off as the cost of keeping the peace. Then I remember the banner. Welcome, baby Alex. I remember my mother hugging me and telling me I wasn't supposed to know, like my own money was a secret I didn't deserve to be in on. And the guilt fades. My brother showed up at my new place last week. I don't know how he got the address. He looked terrible, unshaven, 20 pounds lighter, eyes red like he hadn't slept in days. He asked if we could talk. I let him in. I don't know why. Maybe I was curious. Maybe some small part of me wanted to hear him say he understood. He sat on my couch and stared at the floor for a long time before he said anything. Then he told me he was sorry. He said he'd been thinking about everything over the past few weeks, about all the times he'd asked me for help, and he realized he'd never really thought of it as asking. He'd just assumed I'd say yes because that's what I always did. He said he didn't know how to fix this, that everything in his life had fallen apart, and he didn't know how to put it back together. He said he'd lost his wife, his credit, his relationship with our parents, and he didn't know what to do. I asked him why he came here. He said because I was the only person who'd ever told him no, and he needed to understand why. I told him the truth. I told him I was tired of being the person everyone leaned on but nobody thought about. I told him I'd spent my entire adult life bailing out people who never once considered whether I needed bailing out. I told him the party was the breaking point, but it wasn't the reason. The reason was years of being treated like my worth was measured in how much I could give. He asked if I hated him. I told him I didn't. I told him I just didn't want to be his brother anymore. He left after that. I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know if there was a right thing to do. All I know is that for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for the next call asking for money. I'm not bracing for the next crisis I'm expected to solve. I'm just living my life. And that has to be worth something. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real life-based stories. Thanks in advance.